Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm back with part three of four when it comes to my ranking challenge seasons breakdown. This part will be solely focused on part three, so from 11 to 20 or 20 to 11, since that's the order that I'm going to be revealing the results. And we are finally in the top half. Things are definitely a lot more balanced. There's an overwhelming amount of era 3 seasons that are still in, but I'm excited to see what will happen and what will come up from the results. Let's just get right to it and not waste much time. So the season starting the top half and the second quarter of the list is the season that was tied with Invasion of the Champions, and that is Free Agents, which also has a median score of 19. So this is a season that's always seen as one of the best ever, and it's seen as one that revitalized the series. And when I really do look at it, and break it down, it really doesn't hold up as much, though every time I watch it, I do enjoy it. But I feel like the whole is decent enough, but when you look into the parts, it's overrated, essentially. And I think the more and more time goes on, and the more I settle on free agents, I think it's kind of overrated. So looking at the categories, I gave it a 7 regarding the format. I gave it, it's not a 29 or a 20. So I gave it a 29 when it comes to the cast. I gave it a 21 regarding the drama and 19 regarding the politics. So it's middle of the road in two categories, high on one of them and low on the other. So let's get to the lowest category, and that is the cast. So I shockingly gave this cast a pretty low score compared to all of the claims that the cast being the greatest ever from what people have stated. And I think my issue with the cast is there's a lot of red t-shirt people. So let me just look at here. The likes of an Anissa, Adjane, Jasmine, Camilla, Isaac, Brandon, Preston. Heck, even CT and Zach were kind of under the radar this season too. Didn't have a whole lot to do, and that's not even me including the early boots of the season. I feel like the season's very, very, very top heavy, where the cast who did deliver delivered a lot, but they didn't make up the majority of the cast. Obviously, people like Laurel, Nani, Devin, Teresa, and Carmaria were good, and Johnny, I guess both Johnny's and Jordan were good too. The rest of them didn't do much at all. Even Leroy is very, very under the radar. So in general, I don't think the cast is very good once you get out of the top heavy people. When it comes to the drama, I ranked it at 21st, and this season didn't have as much drama as I remembered it having. Obviously, everyone remembers the Carmelia and Laurel drama that took over throughout the season. Teresa failed to make political moves, and that got her into it with some of the women, CT, Camilla, and Nani had that blow up earlier in the season. Bananas and Jordan kept on arguing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth throughout a lot of the season. And it was entertaining. It was one of the only notable drama that happened within the season. And of course, Oya had a freak out on Jordan. But outside of that, not much happened when it comes to the drama of the season. I was actually shocked about it. So with the politics, I ranked it at 19th because there wasn't a whole lot of alliances that were really delved into during the season. The people at the top, i.e. Johnny and Laura, were always at the top. And there were people that tried to take them out, so I do give them credit for that. Jordan being one of the people who tried to take Bananas out. So a lot of the top men were kind of just aligned with Johnny, but not a whole lot happened after that. We did have a lot of the women try to take out Laurel throughout the season, and I did find that to be decent. But yeah, not a whole lot going on here. And I also think that the kill card definitely ruined a lot of the politics of the season as well, where they couldn't do a whole lot with it. Now onto the format. I gave that a 7, and I feel like people hold this season to a higher standard because of how great the format is. It is an individual season, all the way around, and it's kind of like the duo, but not fully. The challenges kind of alternate, or at least the dailies alternate between it being individual, pairs, or large groups. And the kill card makes it random where you have to compete to stay safe. So there's that element. And I really wish they reused this format in general. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about free agents. I just went through all categories very simply, and there's just not a whole lot there. I think people remember the few people who did a lot throughout the season, and they really, 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 really love the format. But when you really look into it, it doesn't hold up that well. And honestly, it's kind of similar to the Duel 2 in that regard, but I feel like more people acknowledge it with the Duel 2 than Free Agent. But otherwise, it's pretty decent, it's pretty good. You get a good feeling after you watch it, but when you really analyze it, it doesn't hold up as well as you would think. At 19th place, we are continuing on with Era 3, and I have Rivals 3, which has the median score of 18.75. This season was one that I was kind of lower on, but not as low. I guess like that top third quarter is what I would think about it based off of my first impressions. But looking at the scores that I gave it, overall, it makes sense. When it comes to the format, I gave it a 4. The cast, I gave it a 30. The drama, I gave it a 10. And the politics, I gave it a 31. So if you balance that out, it would be around 1920. So I guess that makes sense. So on to the worst. Okay, so the worst the worst category that I gave it, the lowest category score, is the politics, where I gave it a 31. And obviously, this is to a few reasons. One, there was a lot of DQs, quit, and stuff like that during the first half of the season. So it caused for there to be a lot less rounds for there to be any sort of gameplay and less numbers for there to be any sort of interesting votes that could happen. So I do think that's a part of it. But in general, most of the cast knew that Bananas and Vince were the top people with their alliance and their partner Sarah and Jenna. Nobody really did anything about it. A group of them did try to get together, like Wes, Corey, Dario, and Devin, but of course Dario stupidly turned on them, and then afterwards a bunch of the pairs tried to fight to be Bananas and Vince, Jenna, and Sarah's third um couple, so they could get to the final three, and then it was just very, very, very boring. Now, onto the cast, I gave it a 30, and one of the reasons why I scored it this low is because a lot of these pairings weren't rivals at all. Leroy and Avery made no sense as a rivals pairing. Thomas and Simone were paired together for a fight that didn't even make it onto the actual episodes on their season. Uh, Tony and Camilla at this point was a stretch as rivals. Jamie and Kellyanne was due to one simple argument. Wes and Nani also made absolutely no sense as rivals based on what was shown, and even Vince and Jenna was a huge stretch. So just based off of that, you can tell a lot of these pairings were bullshit. A lot of the Are You the One people that the cast really just were not interesting at all, like Brianna and Brandon, Christina and Nate. Uh, Cheyenne was clearly not a fit for the show either. Devin was kind of interesting. Simone caused a lot of drama during the time she was there. Nelson was a complete dud during the season. Amanda was a light fire. So I'll say that. Johnny and Jessica didn't have much to do. Kellyanne was also boring this season, which is why she didn't get a call back for a while. Uh, Nani and Wes were clearly just over it, which is why they took hiatuses after it. Nicole was at her most interesting here. Dario was arguably at his stupidest here. And I didn't care for the top couple. Clearly, the season was all about Johnny Bananas and the newly married Sarah, and they got what they want with that, especially with the twist that happened at the end. So when it comes to the drama, I ranked it at 10. Honestly, I remember editing the video of the fights for my Vimeo, channel, and I think this was like the third or fourth longest. So I do give it credit for that. And there's so much drama, especially earlier on in the season. But at the same time, a lot of it was stupid Are You the One drama that I really, really did not care about. Tony and Camilla got very uncomfortable to watch with their antics and how close to physical that it was getting between them. Obviously, you had Sarah and Johnny working through their relationship the entire time. Camilla and Amanda started their feud here. Simone and Ashley had a nice feud here. Vince awkwardly body slammed Thomas. Then there's the whole Dario versus Devin Corey situation that I mentioned. Nani and Nicole also had their fair share of drama this season. Oh, yes, there's also that stupid Cheyenne situation when they were traveling to the final that caused the entire house to be fighting. And yeah. And when it comes to the format, I gave it a 4 because it replicated the Rivals format that were in the other two Rival seasons, where obviously the winning pair wins the daily. They get to send a pair to. Actually, no, here it's a bit different. They had to nominate 3 pairs to go against the pair that was going to be sent right into elimination, and then they had to pull like a skull or whatever that will determine which of the 3 pairs were safe or would go into elimination. So that part I didn't really mind, and they did it in a way that was less contrived and more sensible when it came to the gameplay compared to a free agent when it comes to that kill card situation. So yeah, I guess when you look at everything, it's definitely a mixed bag. It's understandable why some would have it lower. It's understandable why some would have it a bit higher. But out of the 4 rival seasons, really, and that's me including Final Reckoning, this is easily the weakest, and I'm fine with this being in the middle of the rankings overall. At 18th is Total Madness, with ironically an average score of 18.5. So honestly, a part of me is kind of shocked that it's this high, meaning that it's in the top half, though barely. I was expecting it to barely be in the bottom half, so like 4 or 5 spots lower. But looking at the scores, it definitely makes sense because it has a 22 in the format, 7 in the cast, 13 in the drama, and 32nd in the politics. So balancing it out, obviously it earned a mid placement. I'm kind of shocked that this is higher than an Air Force season like Vendettas, though when you think about it, I don't think the most of either of them. And the 20s, 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th are kind of the ones I'm somewhat mixed on. So I guess that makes sense. So, anyways, the lowest score for Total Madness is the politics at 32nd, and that's because there really wasn't much politics. At first, it was getting up on the newbies, which we saw with the first few votes. That continued, or the layer of the Skull's twist just added that layer, especially with the guys where they sent in Jay to the first 3 eliminations just so they can take his skull. And then Jenny was used to get an easy skull. And then after that, pretty much everyone just started volunteering to go into elimination so they can get their skull. So it really took the fun out of everything and the politics within the season. We did have the likes of Bananas, Josh, and someone else turn on D mid-season when she already had a skull in the Malibu. That was fun, but we didn't get to see the aftermath due to the deletion. And then afterwards, it's just people volunteering, and yeah, that's why it's 32nd in this category. When it comes to the format, I put it at 22nd, and it's due to a lot of what I just discussed. They pretty much implemented the Skulls twist because they're annoyed that a lot of people made it to the final on War of the Worlds 2 without going into elimination. But this is a huge overcorrection, and they didn't realize how it made everything boring. This would have been good since it was an individual season had they kept the format simpler, but they didn't. And because they decided to do this format, there is nothing interesting gameplay wise. It's just everyone volunteering to get their chance. And if they lost, they lost. It wasn't a bunch of people making the moves, and it wasn't fun to watch. And I kind of discussed this with Double Agent as well. So, yeah. Outside of those 2 scores, we actually do have a decent amount of high scores where the drama I ranked it at 13th. Yes, this is kind of the last season that had that typical MTV drama where we had the Noodle Gate with Anissa and Nani, and things almost got physical between them. We had Melissa and Josh going crazy on one another. Then there's that awkward Bailey and Casey situation that might have had to do with some bisexuality, lesbianism that was carried over from the Big Brother season. Jordan and Wes fought a lot throughout the season. Dee had a villainous turn here where she went after Jenny, and then she had her drama with Rogan, Josh, and a few other people. Ashley and Bananas also had it. Ashley and Maddie also had a very, very nasty fight. Then there's Bear extinguishing everyone. Kayla and Nelson argued several times throughout the season, and there's so much more that I can really just discuss, and it just shows that if it wasn't for the format, the season would have been better because the drama was here, and when you look at the cast, it was here as well. This was the season that it seemed like they realized their errors with the last two seasons with casting a bunch of random international people and casting way too many people, though unfortunately they would forget about this a few seasons later, where the newbies that they cast were for main shows, whether there's Are You the One, The Amazing Grace, Survivor, and Big Brother, and they all did something that was notable throughout the season. And when you look at the veteran side, you definitely had of course, Johnny Bananas, West, and CT were the OGs, though CT was booted very early on. Yeah, Jordan, who kind of had a downfall throughout the season. Nelson and Corey came back after being off for a few seasons. Rogan continued his streak from War of the Worlds 2. Cal's a regular at this point, and so was Josh and Bear, though he was kind of flaming out here. Jenny got a second chance, though she still wasn't that interesting. Melissa came back after her. Melissa and Kayla both came back after their fight on Final Reckoning a few seasons ago, and they both had their interesting stories. Dee was a huge villain throughout the season. Anissa came back after some time off and hasn't left the franchise since. Nani, this was arguably her last interesting season before she got boggled down to Casey. Maddie was pretty much a dud. This was Jenna's final season due to her drama with Zach that was just tiring. Tula was given a second chance, so she didn't do much here. Ashley and Tori would have a streak of bad seasons around this point too. So honestly, the cast was good and the drama was good, but it was mainly the format that ruined the season. It caused them to not play the game a lot because there really wasn't much to play. And the location was also just horrendous because it caused them to be lethargic. It caused them to be pissed off. They didn't want to do anything and they're really losing their minds, and it wasn't in a fun way. This was also the season where they started doing the dark color schemes, which really just took a lot of anguish just to watch because everything was so dark and gloomy, and they continue this for the next several seasons. At 17th is Battle of the Bloodlines with a median score of 18.25. I'm also shocked that the season made it this high because every time I watch it, I have such a negative opinion on it and a negative stink on it. But I guess once I broke it down regarding the categories, it's not as bad as I thought. And I guess looking at the scores, it makes sense why it placed around here. So with the format, I placed it at 29th. The cast, I placed it at 21st. With the drama, I placed it at 11th. And the politics, I placed it at 12th. So let's get to the lowest score, which is the format. Ugh, what do I even need to say about it? One, deciding to do Bloodline just wasn't a good idea because most of them weren't meant for TV, and most of them only did this so their relative could be on the show for the season. So a lot of them just didn't care and they weren't telegenic. Then, after 2 rounds, they decided to split it into teams where each of the person from each bloodline were on opposite teams. And based on who won and who lost, they also alternate between guys' days and girls' days. And depending on that, if you're a boy team or boy girl team or girl boy team, if you're a girl boy team, you're always in danger no matter what gendered elimination, what gendered round it is, which sucked. And also due to this, you could be in elimination and because you lost the elimination, your partner would go home, or you were the one who wasn't in elimination because you were on the winning team, but your partner was in elimination, they lost. You both would go home. That was a really, really shitty twist that just ruined all of the momentum of the season. And of course, they ended it by the end game, but by that point, it was kind of just too late. The second lowest score is in the cast. From what I remember, obviously, I said the Bloodline sucked. Most of them didn't come back for a second season, with the exception of three, and that was clearly for a reason. They really weren't telegenic. They really didn't add any interesting dynamic. A lot of them didn't really want to be there, and it's just very, very awkward. And it didn't pay off much. I think the reason why I placed it higher was because the veterans or the alumni were pretty decent. Obviously, Cara Maria and Johnny Bananas were repping it for the OGs. Kellyanne came back after a very long hiatus, and she had an interesting moments here. Anissa, this was one of her messiest seasons. Jenna really came into her own as a character and a competitor here. Uh, Nani didn't do a whole lot. Oh, actually, no. Nani did have her fair share of drama throughout the season, though this is the earliest she's ever been booted. Uh, Camilla, this is a relatively forgettable season for her and Leroy. And Kahada's comeback also just came. Kahada came back in the last season, and that's come back pretty much ended because he was booted so early. Um, the new alumni, I did feel like were good, with the exception of Christine. She didn't really do much. Tony, Dario, and Corey made their mark throughout the season, and it makes sense why they're cast throughout the next several seasons. I guess, this was Thomas's most interesting season, though it doesn't really say much. So overall, the cast is a mixed bag because the vets were good, but the newbies really weren't, and there were some interesting dynamics here and there. Though it got more uncomfortable once Abram arrived, and we're gonna leave that to talk about the drama. Yeah, hold on. I talked about no, no, I didn't talk about the politics yet. Okay, so with the politics, he did have the newcomers kind of align together and they tried to take shots at the big vets. So I really liked that from them. Of course, it caused that blow up earlier on in the season. Carmaria and Thomas had an alliance with a few other people and they were doing pretty well, but then Abram came in mid-season and Bananas and Vince decided to drop that bomb randomly. Not randomly at all, it was very intentional and convenient when they did it, which blew up that entire alliance there. Anissa was trying and failing to play the middle, which got her in a lot of drama with people like Corey and Kelly Ann. So this was one of the more political seasons with people at least trying to play the game and they all had their own self-interest. So there was that. When it comes to the drama, there definitely was a lot of good drama here. Of course, we had Tony's flame out earlier on in the season. He ended up going at a lot of the women. This ended up with him and Shane, his brother, physically fighting one another. We had Anissa throwing drinks at Kellyanne because she kind of made a racial comment there. Anissa and Corey was a disaster waiting to happen that we got to see all season. The Abram and Carmaria drama was just icky. The Carmaria and Bananas drama was also kind of icky, partially due to that. Anissa had drama with her cousin. Anissa and Carmaria at the end was actually very good drama there, and I'm sure I'm missing. Oh yes, Jenna and her cousin fighting earlier on in the season was also pretty great too. So in general, I just think the entire concept of Bloodline wasn't good at all, which we saw in the format and the cast, but they made the most of it, which is why it isn't the worst season ever. Once you break down the elements and the categories, though you don't really get a good vibe from watching it. So it's kind of a mixed bag, hence it being here. So I'm pretty sure when I consider my first opinions on it at the very end of this video, or the series of videos, depending on how I split this up, it'll probably be lower. So we actually have a tie regarding the 16th place and the 15th place, as they both ranked or they got an 18 median, but based on my first impressions list, the gauntlet is lower, so the gauntlet is at 16th with the median of 18. And I think that's a good spot for an Era 1 season, especially when 6 of them, if I'm recalling correctly, were booted right at the bottom, so it making it up here is pretty good. So, looking at the scores of the gauntlet, it's got a 19 in the format, a 14 in the cast, the 30 in the drama, and 9 in the politics. So it's really the drama that kind of held it back. And honestly, it's not that this season was bad when it comes to the drama element, but I just think because it's such an early season and compared to all the other seasons, or most of the seasons that came after it, the drama here just seems pretty simplistic. So the drama on the Road Rules team is pretty much a lot of the cast didn't like Katie. This would start Katie and Veronica's feud that would carry on into the next season, and mainly the Road Rules guys, mainly Adam, pretty much wanting Sarah gone. So those two went back and forth for quite a bit. Uh, and then the likes of Rachel and Veronica also got annoyed with some of the men too. On the real world side, you mainly had Cora fighting with Mike and Trishelle throughout a lot of the season, and even earlier in the season, she was getting on her team's nerves for just talking too much and kind of just blowing it. Tanya, this will be the start of Tanya really being disliked amongst the cast since they were arguing with her about her injury and how she needed to go. Due to that, what happened? Apparently, Irulan was a huge drama stirrer throughout the season, which we see bits and pieces of that. But when she was finally eliminated and seeing how the Road Rules cast reacted to it, that was funny. And then it caused the two teams to kind of go back and forth at the end there. So more drama than the first 5 or 6 seasons, but compared to all the other seasons after it, it doesn't hold up as much. So the second lowest category that I ranked it in was in the format, where I placed it at 19th. And again, I have to base. Okay, I'll give this props because they actually had a decent format where they realized they needed to send people home throughout the entire season, but doing it via vote offs wasn't that interesting, so they created eliminations where you nominate 2 people to go into elimination and then they would go home. But they didn't work out the kinks of this, where they didn't make it gender specific, where they had male days and female days. They didn't do that, so men often went against women in the eliminations, and it seemed like both teams had to nominate one person to go into elimination. So no matter what, your team was always at risk of losing someone, so there was that. But otherwise, this was a fine format. Obviously, they would tune it up for the following 2 gauntlets in their own way, and it wasn't a bad format. Though it still cost a lot of the cast to make it to the end, I guess. But it was consistent eliminations throughout the season. The second highest category, or the third lowest, whatever you want to say, is the cast, where I ranked it at 14. So let me look at the cast. I feel like for an Era 1 season, this was a pretty good cast. The 2 seasons right before it had a way too bloated cast where there are a lot of red t-shirt people, and I don't think that was really the case here. There are, of course, people like David and Montana who didn't get to do much, and even Rachel, who made it far, wasn't the Rachel and Thea, who made it far, weren't the most impactful. Um, See, even like Norman and Nathan, they were okay. I wouldn't say they were duds, but they're not going to be the most memorable. But when you look at the real team, Alton, Coral, Mike were solid. I already briefly mentioned Irulan earlier. Trishelle had a pretty big season here, despite her getting booted mid-season. Elka had a quick downfall, and I already talked about Tanya. And Matt was an interesting choice to be put on the show, but I'm more than fine with him being a one-season wonder. Katie was an early season flameout, but obviously she would prove her worth. Tina, this was a quieter season for Tina. Even Steve, yeah, he didn't really do much of anything either, which is why people were shocked he was brought back to All Stars. Because what the fuck? Who the fuck is he? Tyrion continued his flop era narrative around here, but it was kind of funny. Abraham was mainly memorable for his threesome or whatever with Veronica and Rachel, though he himself was quieter here. Veronica and Rachel really came into their own here after being blindsided by the women in the prior seasons. Ronnie was quiet enough. She was quiet but efficient. Sarah had a huge season. She's really like the prototypical underdog that's still remembered despite her only doing one season. Oh, I forgot, Dave and Karen, they had their weird relationship that's kind of just awkward to watch. Duo was cool enough here, though he himself didn't do a whole lot. And Adam clearly showed how petty he was throughout the entire season, and that's a thing that's consistent throughout his reality TV career, though he tried to hide it on the All Stars seasons. But he was the big bad guy. Now, when it comes to the politics, I actually ranked it at number 9. And now that I'm thinking, I think a lot of it's mainly due to the Road Rules team. Of course, we had the guys like Adam, Dave, and Theo who wanted the guys to stick it to the end because they felt like they were stronger. The other women, like Rachel and Veronica, were putting up with it and they grew strategically as players and they had to maneuver through. Of course, we had Sarah's underdog arc really come into play here. But even on the real world side, there's definitely sides of the house that you could clearly see were kind of forming that was kind of interesting to watch. Cora had a lot of power throughout the season, and a lot of people realized that, but they wanted to kind of destroy that. Her and Mike were kind of going against each other for a lot of the season. That was very interesting as well. Elka was backstabbed by Mike, despite them all making it to the end together in season 5. And I feel like for an Era 1 season, this is one of the more political seasons, so I do give it credit there. And I'm shocked I talked about the Gauntlet one for 7 minutes. But anyways, it's a pretty good Era 1 season, and overall, it's a solid enough season, though it hasn't aged the best due to just the formatting issues. But it's fine enough. It doesn't have the highest highs, but it doesn't really have low lows either. At 15th is Cutthroat, which was tied and still kind of is tied with the Gauntlet, as it also has the score of 18, but I broke the tie in Cutthroat's favor because it had the higher first impression based on the list that I created in that regard. So this season's a decent season. It's a solid season. That's pretty much all that I can really say about it. And looking at the scores, it kind of makes sense. I ranked it 8th when it comes to the format, 18th when it comes to the cast, 17th when it comes to the drama, and 29th when it comes to the politics. So let's just get to the politics. There really wasn't a whole lot going on. With the blue team, I think they just sent in Katie and Eric a few times because they saw them as the weakest. There's not much going on there, and they kept on losing, so eventually they had to send in everyone pretty much, with the exception of Jen. The gray team, it was kind of like Cara Maria, Abe, and somewhat. Cara and Abe are on one side, Sarah and Laura are on the other side, and Dan and Pete were kind of just playing the middle there, but there wasn't any heavy politics there. And then on the red team, it was pretty much Tyler, Paula, Tori, Brad, and Dunbar in one alliance, and they sent in Camilla and Brandon in over and over and over and over again. And in a weird way, I definitely do think the 3-team format kind of weakened the politics within the season in a way, though I like the fact that they had 3 teams. So the next lowest score is the cast, which is at 18th. And I think a lot of the big time names took a break with this season, and they wanted to establish some of their newer rookie crop from like the last few seasons. So the Ruins newbies, the Fresh Meats 2 newbies, and some other people just haven't been on in quite a while. Brad and Tori, of course, had a big season as they were finally married here, and they really wanted to get Brad that win, and they accomplished that. Dunbar and Paula obviously fell out at the end there, and Dunbar got his win. Paula got screwed over yet again right before the final. Tyler came back after being off for a few years. He came back a different person. He was a lot stronger physically, and he got his win. Camilla was a polarizing newbie who got even more polarizing. This was arguably Brennan's only interesting season. Melinda hadn't been on the show in a few years. She's divorced from Danny and she was essentially invisible. Chet was okay here. Mandy also didn't have much to do during the season as well, though she was kind of made fun of. Abram came back after a few seasons, and of course he had his long running relationship with Maria start, and that pissed everyone off. Laurel was even bitchier than usual, and she really came off as unlikable here, but it was entertaining. Sarah kind of was Laurel's henchwoman, and she also was very unlikable, which kind of carried over from Fresh Meats too, but at least she made it to the end this time. Luke was boring yet again, and I see why this was his final season. Dan came into the season sober, which made him less interesting, but it's definitely better lifestyle wise. It was best that he never came back. Aya was kind of just weird. Chiffon finally flopped for the third and final time, and it was over, though it was kind of pathetic. Vinny was pathetic. JD was a dad. Emily was a strong rookie when it came to her performance, and obviously her dynamic with Ty remained interesting. Jen had one of her quieter seasons personality-wise, though she still had that drama with Paula, though she still competed well. Derek, kind of there, invincible, kind of boring. Not surprising, he wasn't on for a decade after this. This was one of Johnny's normal, weaker seasons, so he got into his first of drama. Teresa had a drama with Camilla, then she was a ghost for the rest of the season. This will be Katie's final season for a while until All Stars, and you could tell she was over it. Ty was a complete disaster in an uncomfortable way. I think Easy was just annoying, and the other two, Emily and Derek, didn't really offer much, if anything. So in general, the cast was a relative mixed bag, and I'm shocked I talked about the cast for that long. The drama, there was a decent amount of drama. Laurel got into it with several people throughout the season. I already mentioned the dynamics with the great team. It was just a complete disaster. Paula got into it with Jen, Camilla, and then her team when they snaked her. Brad and Tori were just completely unlikable. They got into their several fights with people. Brandon and Ty got into it with a lot of people. Ty, in general, had a few nasty fights throughout the season. Laurel, Red, Eric, and I'm missing some. What I noticed about this season is that a lot of the fights are kind of just one-offs, and there's not a continuing narrative outside of the red team fighting with Camilla and the gray team's dynamics there, so I think that's kind of why. And then I had the format at 8. So, like I mentioned, I really did like the 3-team format where the first place team, they won immunity. The other 2 teams had to nominate one person each, and then the people nominated had to face elimination together, and then one person would go home for that. It was very simplistic, and we saw the interesting dynamics between the 3 teams, and they kept it that way throughout the entire season. We would see the 3 teams kind of come up in a few of the Era 4 seasons, but they never kept it through the entire season. So overall, this is a solid enough, decent enough season without a lot of the main characters of the era. Not the greatest, but it's not bad at all, hence its placement here. At 14th is The Ruins with a median score of 16.5. Part of me is and isn't shocked that it's this high. Obviously, this season is way too toxic, which makes it a hard watch. But when you look at the parts, there's a lot of good ingredients in it. So when it comes to the scores, I ranked it 17th regarding the format. The cast was ranked 24th. The dramas was ranked 8th, and the politics was ranked 17th. So it's most definitely the drama that bolstered this season up higher than it otherwise would have been. So, anyways, this gets to the worst criteria, and that is the cast. So, on paper, it's actually a decent enough cast when you look at the champions. You have some older champs and some newer champs. Of course, you had JEKD, which are like the people who are somewhat running things in this era. They all got their recent wins. Susie won the Gauntlets too. She came back after a few years off And she had a decent enough final season, especially when it came to the eliminations. Doraus and Veronica were older winners who hadn't been on in a while, but they didn't really fit in the best. Johanna obviously was mainly cast due to her drama with West post breakup and post Kenny that they clearly just wanted to capture. Cyrus is a very old winner who hadn't been on since the Gauntlet too, but he didn't really offer much in a nutshell because this was final flagship season. Pretty much the same thing with EBs. Of course, West was most of the drama for the first half of the season. You can tell that Katie and Tanya were kind of getting burnt out of the show, and even kind of Evelyn at this point in time, you can tell that she was starting to get over it too. When it comes to the challengers, Kellyanne and Sarah had great seasons. Casey's shtick was kind of old, but I guess everyone kind of counting her was somewhat funny. Dunbar didn't really do much of anything this season outside of a secret hookup with Kimberly, and the same thing with her. Brad completely lost it as the season went on due to consistently losing, and which led up to that fight with Darrell. Kahada had a kind of underdog run that was nice to watch. Danny and Adam didn't do crap, and everyone else who was booted below them on the champion side also didn't do much. So I think there are a lot of that on the challengers side, and when you look at the cast, there's a bit too much toxicity that kind of brings it all down. And the cast didn't have the best dynamic with one another, and a lot of the older people didn't mesh well at all. So when it comes, okay, so the format, I didn't care for the fact that it was champions versus contenders, winners versus non-winners. And it isn't shocking that a lot that the champions continue to dominate while the non-winners, which also had a few rookies, kept on losing. So there is that. When it comes to the politics, I will say that it was interesting seeing Susie kind of maneuver herself through the veterans team. And while they didn't show it, it's clear that there definitely was some cross team alliances. There really wasn't much politics within the contender side because they kept on losing and they're trying to save it up. Veronica, of course, pulled her move that saved her from going into elimination that caused Evie's to go in and go home, and she herself had to kind of maneuver her way through everything. So it's okay enough politically, but it's not really that notable. And honestly, the savior or the main savior of the season is the drama, which is very, very, very high. There's a lot of, especially for season within the first half of the show's run. At this point, it was 40 minutes, which was long for that time period, and is very memorable. Of course, you had Wes fighting with Kenny, which would carry on for the next few seasons. Evan was personally betrayed by Wes. This season was really the start of Bananas and Wes's feud, especially with the whole Evelyn situation where the two of them kept just freaked out on everyone within the team. Of course, Wes and Johanna fought several times due to the breakup and then them being on the same team. Darrell was unlikable this season with his fighting with Wes and Kellyanne, and then him and Brad pretty much beat fighting one another. Johnny, unlikable yet again. I think, yeah, he and Susie got into a few fights as well. Katie had her few meltdowns too, especially during her final episode where she snapped at Sarah here and there. Sarah and Kenny's dynamic was very off to watch. And of course, there's Veronica and Tanya, which was a after effect of the drama from the Inferno 3, which is honestly just very, very, very sad to watch, especially with how Tanya left the franchise and then getting into that fight and the homophobia as well. The entire situation was just sad. Overall, The Ruins has some of the most classic challenge moments, but there's elements of it that are just very predictable and very toxic. But I guess it doesn't have the worst of the worst of anything, and it's an easier watch because it's 10 episodes. And stuff that happens this season does carry over from prior seasons and into future seasons, so I guess that's why it's this high. At 13th is Dirty 30 with an average median at 15.5. So this season does have a lot of good qualities, so its placement does make sense, but there's some of the ickiness and negative qualities that does hold it back from being an all-time good or great season. So when it comes to the categories, I ranked it at 27th with the format, I ranked the cast at 10th, I ranked the drama at 18th, and the politics at 17th. So, the format. Obviously, this is the season where they decided to do redemption for the first time. I guess Axis 2 had their own version with the Exile twist, but pretty much this is the season that had the redemption twist, and they did a huge purge in the beginning so they could justify the first redemption. I didn't really like how they handled it. And then they did it three. Hold on. Yeah, they had 3 rounds of redemption. The first one, obviously, they each had to compete against one another in tournament style, and the final two who made it went back in, i.e., Tony and Jenna, though they were just booted. The second one was based off of like an eating competition or something along the lines of that, where Anissa and Hunter came back. And the third one was just pretty crappy. And how they handled the third redemption overall is pretty much if you won the daily, you get you get the power to immediately eliminate someone from the game without sending them into elimination. So that happened during the third redemption, and it really just took away from it. But outside of that, we had was it the Kelp? No, it was that pull thingy where pretty much you had the choice to save someone or to backstab someone and send them into elimination. That part I did like, and we did. Oh, I think it's the double cross, and we did see that in Final Reckoning. But the redemption twist really just ruined things with the season, and the pacing was also just pretty bad as a result of it. So the second lowest category is the drama. There was a decent amount of drama in the season. We had the young bucks versus the veteran guys. There was a lot of good drama with that, especially though we had Nelson punching Derek, which caused him to go home. Nelson was just very aggressive this season, uncomfortably so. Hunter had his feud with Kayla and Jordan, kind of. So there's a lot of back and forth there. Corey had his actually, no, that's not a part of the drama. And then with the women, we eventually had Jenna and Kayla versus Camilla and Carmilla. That drama I did think was good. Tony versus Camilla also had a hilarious feud, but there's a few really, really icky, disgusting, and honestly racist fights that happened. The first incident is with Shane and Simone, where they're initially talking about race, and then he got mad because Simone talked for unambiguous black people and stated that mixed people are different, so he decided to physically assault her. That situation just really rubbed me the wrong way. And then, of course, there's the whole Camilla and Leroy situation where she decided to be racist to him. She said several slurs at him and supposedly other black people at the time. And then she wanted to throw like weights at him. It was very uncomfortable to watch, and they completely botched how they handled that situation. And there's also the Jordan saying that Jimmy had Down syndrome face as well. So a few really, really icky, uncomfortable situations that really just hold the season and the drama back. When it comes to the cast, it's actually a pretty good cast for the most part. You could tell that they went out of their way to cast a lot of the big names. So Camilla and Carmaria were huge names at the time. Jenna and Kayla were Jenna was kind of a big name too. She had a few seasons under her belt. Kayla was emerging. Jing Veronica was the OG who hadn't been on in a while, and this was clear after the success of Shane in the prior season. Anissa came back after a few seasons off, and so did Jemmy. Yeah, because she dealt with the knight's death, so she took a few seasons off. She came back here. And then, sorry, just briefly, Darrell came back. Actually, no, he continued his comeback after the last season. Derek came back after being off for the entire era, though he didn't really add anything to the season. Jordan came back after a few seasons. This was a relatively quiet season for Bananas and Leeway, though there are obvious big names. Dario was a dud this season. We had Nelson, Corey, and Hunter. They had very good dynamics with one another. A lot of the newbies that they had here really didn't add much of anything outside of Tori and all the earlier booths. Obviously, didn't get much of a chance to do much of anything, hence them being here. But overall, it's a pretty solid cast with all things considered. And then when you look at oh, I forgot. Tony also had a very huge season here in more ways than one, too. So when it comes to the politics, I ranked it at 7. On the men's side, we had the Young Bucks versus everyone else. Though it was mainly just the Young Bucks versus the OGs, and Jordan was aligned with the OGs like CT, Derek, I guess Leroy at this point, though he was an OG, and Banana. So that dynamic kind of carried through the season. On the women's side, we had Jenna, Camilla, and Carmilla initially aligned together against the weaker women like Veronica, Anissa, Brittany, Jamie, and then the foursome kind of split up afterwards. Honestly, if it wasn't for the few really, really icky situations and the redemption format and a few stragglers within the cast, the season could have been an all-timer, but 13th is high enough. At 12th is the Inferno 2 with an average median of 14.75. So obviously this isn't as good as the first Inferno, but it's still a very worthy follow-up. And for an Era 1 season, this is a very high ranking. And when I'm looking at the scores, it's pretty interesting. I ranked it at 15th regarding the format. The cast, I actually ranked it at number 2. The drama, I ranked it at 12. And with the politics, I ranked it at 30. So if it wasn't for the politics, this season would have been a few spots higher, pretty much. So with the politics, I couldn't really find any politics within the season. There wasn't a whole lot happening there. When it comes to the badasses, it's mainly just Veronica, Rachel, and Tina wanting Tanya gone. Though a lot of that was mainly just petty drama, not personal strategic gameplay. And apparently there was like a vet alliance with like the likes of sorry, Abram, Darrell, Brad, and Derek might have been involved in it. Oh yes, there's a lot of talk about Abram and Mike being aligned, and that caused for some tension, but it didn't really go anywhere. And on the good guys, I don't remember there being much focus on the politics either. That's why I ranked it so low in that category. So when it comes to the format, I ranked it at 15th. I feel like the Inferno format is okay. I did like the fact that each team has to nominate someone, then they have like a veto like competition where they can save one another to get a life shield or someone can get the life shield themselves and potentially use it. And then a replacement nominee would have to be made, so that part I did like. What I don't like about the Inferno is that there's so few eliminations, even compared to the Gauntlet, where a lot more people get sent home. And because there's so few eliminations, most of the cast end up making it to the end anyway, so I think that's why I ranked it at 15th. When it comes to the drama, I ranked it at 12. So there's definitely a decent amount of drama here, especially for an Era 1 season. There, obviously, we had Tanya fighting with Tina, Veronica, and Rachel for a lot of the season. That got uncomfortable after a while due to them like taking pictures of her when she was nude. We had the mess between Beth, Robin, and Tanya that happened very early on in the season that was very intense, where Robin pretty much slut shamed Tanya. Tanya pretty much said that Robin's relationship with Mike was an ish. Then Tanya realized that Beth sold her out, so they argued back and forth. So Tanya grabbed a bunch of Beth's stuff and threw it in the pool, and then Beth was unsafe. Beth also picked a few fights with her team before she dipped. Quickly, I remember Tina and Abram having a very tense argument. Darrell and Abram started snapping at one another here and there, and there might be some other examples that I'm just missing at the moment. And when it comes to, hold on. Hey, yeah, I ranked the cast at second when it comes to the cast, which is actually kind of shocking. But I think one of the main reasons why I did that is because the cast was actually very, very small. And especially within this era, they definitely benefited from a smaller cast because more people got focused on. I think the only outright duds within this cast is like Shavonda and John. Beth had her villainous arc where she was really playing it up. Robin had a decent short run. Jodie pretty much got caught in a sloppy gameplay and it cost for her to get booted mid-season. Kurama had his fight with CT. Dan had his final season where he was a lot bitchier and he's pretty much trying to be the fourth wheel when it comes to the three evil women. And then he got into it with CT at the end. Veronica, Tina, and Rachel are seen as iconic, though they went too far. Tanya had a really good season here. You can definitely tell that Julie was calming down after she made a fool of herself on the first Inferno, though you definitely still saw some of the messiness there. I think she was married too, so maybe that was one of the reasons why. Mike had a really great final season, performance-wise and personality-wise, though you could definitely tell that he was having it up for the cameras to the point where it was kind of annoying at times. Landon had a strong first season, and despite his archetype being pretty boring, he seemed like someone who could have fun. Sorry, Jamie was also a dud too. Durrell had his moments here and there, but he was yet again just very under the radar and not the most notable. Abram had a very good season here. CT was just as unlikable as ever, and Derek was decent, and Brad had his Reggie. Overall, it's a good season, though I don't think it's one of the best of the best, hence its placement here. So, the final season in the second top half, and just missing the first quarter at 11th, is the duel, which has the average score of 14.25. So, this is a season that I really, really, really liked the first time, and I've liked it every single time I've rewatched it. But a part of me knew that it wasn't as good as I thought it was, where initially I had this at number one, number two, number three, but the more I've rewatched it and the more I actually broke down the categories, I realized, yeah, it definitely doesn't deserve that spot. So with the categories, I have it at number one with the format, I put it at number eight with the cast. When it comes to the drama, I put it at 23rd, and with the politics, I put it at 25th. So the lowest category is the politics, so let's get into it. From what I remember, the likes of an Evic, no, an Evan, Derek, was CT in that alliance? I'm not too sure. But, um, Robin, DM, Kina, and Jody were in an alliance that pretty much stuck true the entire time. The people who weren't in the alliance tried to get something together, but it ended up failing. There was the moment where Evan and West talked about staking and targeting CT, but it didn't fall through. So West kind of just let West kind of let Evan kind of take the fall for that, causing him to be eliminated by CT. But otherwise, there's really not a whole lot happening when it comes to the political element of it. And it also didn't help that pretty much the entire cast agreed to target the rearward Key West right off the bat, so it kind of made things boring and stagnated when it came to that. And I put the drama at 23rd because while there are some definite notable moments when it comes to the drama in the season that's still heavily remembered today and in more recent years, there wasn't a lot of drama throughout the season at all. Of course, there's Tina punching Beth that caused her to get DQ'd. Beth was hated yet again by a lot of the people, so that was kind of fun. Anissa got into it with Paula. There's, of course, that racist fight between Robin and Anissa that definitely dinged it down. Um, Wes and CT had that huge blow up where CT got eliminated. I think Svetlana got into it with Brad and Beth, but outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot to it. I remember editing the dual video that's on my Vimeo, and it was very, very, very short, even shorter than some of the other seasons that are more often than not deemed boring at around this era. So that's really it when it comes to the drama. When it comes to the cast, I placed it at 8 and definitely benefited from having a small cast. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think this cast was a bit smaller than the Duel 2, so I think that might be one of the reasons why this season's so much better than the Duel 2. Tina wasn't there for a while, but she had a notable moment with her punching Beth. Paula was a rookie who didn't get a chance to do much, but she faced off against Anissa. Casey was an utter dud this season, though a part of it was due to her being booted early. Fresh Meat were also the next targets after Key West. Beth continued her villain arc that lasted midway through the season, though she was screwed. Robin, unlikable due to that racist moment, but even still, she didn't have a whole lot going on, since I think this was her first season post-Mark and she didn't get a whole lot of screen time. Kina came off as pretty disappointing post the Gauntlet too, and the strong character and performance really just wasn't there. Kind of glad this was her last season. DM had her romance with CT, which was huge, and it definitely added a lot to the season. Anissa was an underdog this time around. She had to win several eliminations, and she had a fair share of conflict too. Svetlana is seen as one of the best one season wonders. Jodie was boring here, no doubt about it, but still she was focused on the win, and she definitely beasted it, won and dipped. Johnny Bananas and Tyler didn't get a chance to do much of anything here. Kenny was definitely boring this season, though I think a part of it was due to him being booted so early, so he didn't really get a chance to do much. Nehemiah had his interactions with Beth here, which was kind of endearing, but outside of that, he didn't do much either. I remember Derek picking fights with Beth here and there, but outside of that, he didn't do a whole lot either. Um, being Easy or Eric, he was kind of just there for a lot of the season as well. He didn't really do a whole lot here, but he didn't piss me off. Evan got to shine this season performance-wise. He had his decent moments here and there. Brad came close to winning, but he didn't. Brad, whenever he drinks, is always kind of just scary because he turns into such a loony, though he's such a normal guy when he's not drinking. CT is a huge character this season. He got into his fair share of drama and he beasted a lot. And Wes was still annoying this season, but he wasn't as intolerable as he was in Fresh Meat, but he got his win and he had his fair share of moments too. And then, of course, the format I ranked it at number one because it's just an individual season. You have to win as individuals, you have to compete as individuals, and there's only two finalists, so you really had to fight to get there. And I really like the format and the chain that they do after each daily, where the daily winner has to choose one person to save, then they do that. Sorry, until there's one person left that will be going to elimination, and then they have to choose their opponents as anyone but the person who won. So very strong season, but it's not the best due to the lack of drama and politics. So that was part three of the list. As you saw, there's a decent amount of era 3 seasons being booted as 4 of them finally went. One era 4 season, 2 era 2 seasons, and 2 era 1 seasons and 3 era 2 seasons. So things are a bit more balanced. Looking at the top 10, 4 of them are from era 3 of them are from era 4. So, hold on. What is he for? 2 of them are from era 2, and 1 are from era 1. So, not that shocking that most from the latter half of the show's run are still in, but it is what it is. And then after part 4, I'm going to show you a few of the other lists. The first list will be based off of my first impressions, like my immediate impressions after watching and reviewing these movies individually, and then I'm going to combine both lists because I feel like it's important to include the first impressions. To merge the first impressions or my immediate impressions and my qualitative breakdown lists to get the overall feel and vibe. Thank you all for watching, and part 4 will be great.